Welcome to Refresh Daily Podcast, a place where you can find tips, strategies, and encouragement to help you find more joy in your everyday life and to give you a firm foundation to help you build an authentic creative practice that will lift your spirit and leave you feeling fabulous. I'm Dawn Herring, your host, artist, avid journal keeper, and founder of Refresh with Dawn Herring, where art and joy align.
Are you ready to listen to the message you are given that tells you what will make your heart sing? Pay close attention and create yourself a haven of delight and jubilation for your days.
Vibrant color, hand lettering, and illustration done by hand. I'm Dawn Herring, and I am now offering Dawn's Dynamic Designs hand lettering and illustration service for your small business brand and for your products and services. I create vibrant images, hand lettered and illustrated, in my studio, and I provide this for your marketing and for your website and your blog. If you're interested in having a discussion with me about how we can create vibrant images for your small business, please contact me at dawnherring.net and go to Dawn's Dynamic Designs hand lettering and illustration on my website. I look forward to connecting with you and discussing what your needs are as a small business owner so that you can have the kind of images that you want to promote your small business and your products and services. Welcome to Refresh Daily Podcast, Episode 11, Heart and Home. Today I'm excited to have a special guest, Morgan Preece, who is an oil painter and a vocalist, and she has a real knack for amalgamating creativity in the home. Do enjoy. Welcome to Refresh Daily Podcast, Episode 11, that we are calling Heart and Home. I am Dawn Herring, artist, hand letterer and illustrator, watercolor painter, avid journal keeper, and founder of Refresh with Dawn Herring, where art and joy align. And today I am super excited to have a very special guest with me, Morgan Preece. Yay! Happy to have you today, Annie. Awesome, awesome, awesome. And I want to introduce her properly, so I'm going to go ahead and share her bio. It says, Morgan Preece is an oil painter. She grew up watching Bob Ross, yes, I remember him, rather than cartoons on Saturday mornings, and spent a lot of time drawing as a kid. She took art classes in school and played with various mediums. As she grew older, she became more involved in music and eventually set art aside completely at the beginning of high school to focus on singing. After pursuing music and family through college and her 20s, she finally rediscovered art in her early 30s, giving oil paints a try for the very first time. And she fell in love with their buttery richness. Annie now spends her time caring for her children, making a home, and creating art. She believes art influences the family dynamic in unique ways and creates art that helps families feel connected to each other and their home. She resides in Salt Lake City, Utah with her husband and 4 children. Welcome, Annie. I'm so glad to have you here aboard for Refresh Daily Podcast. The purpose, of course, of this podcast is for folks to be inspired to find their creative voice and to determine what will bring them joy. And so I'm so excited to have you aboard today so that we can tap into your creative life and all that it entails. And I'm very excited about this. I did initially connect with Annie on Periscope way back, 4 or 5 years ago. And I connected with her on Instagram, and I have been so inspired by the content that she shares in her feed and her stories, where she talks about art and shares the different things that she's up to, including cooking in the kitchen, which up until a few years ago, I really wasn't really into being in the kitchen, and I've actually been inspired to be in the kitchen as a result of Annie's wonderful creativity that she shows in her stories. It's so much fun to watch. So Annie, welcome, and I want to dive right in and ask you about your artistic story. When did it begin, and what does it look like, and how has it impacted you as an artist now?
Okay. Well, as you said, I started by just like watching Bob Ross and cartoons. Like that was a big influence. That's something I just loved. I looked forward to every week. And when we lived in Salt Lake, when I was really little, my grandma was an artist, and we would go over to her home usually Sunday evening, and I would like just leaf through all of her recent work. She ended up having a stroke when I was about 7 or 8, and was paralyzed on her whole right side. And so she had to learn everything again with her left side, and never was able to really speak. And so she had an art teacher who was so wonderful and lived really nearby, and he would come over every week and help her kind of as art therapy to sort of relearn how to paint again. And she only did watercolor after that. I have some of her pieces in my home, and so that was a big influence, watching her, how much it meant to her and how it helped her in her life. So that was a big influence.
Yeah, that's really hugely important to have someone so close to you like that. Yes, absolutely.
In real life, yeah. And so I watched all that and started taking classes just at school, whatever was offered. If there was an art class, I would take it.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so even through like for my freshman year of high school, I was in the art club and did all sorts of things like that. But when I got into my sophomore year of high school, I really had to choose, because you're required to take science and you're required to take math and you're required to take English. But like art and music, you can like just have to choose one. So at the time I chose music, which was the right choice at the time for me. And so I didn't do any art. I didn't take AP art. I didn't take drawing, whatever. So I did the school musical and all this stuff. And I did that all through college. And I got married and started having kids in my mid-20s, and sang here and there as I could. And eventually in my kind of mid to late 20s, I started taking voice lessons again for a few years. After my third baby, I was also like, doing graphic design, like a few kind of dabbling in a bunch of different things online.
Yeah.
And my husband was like, you need to like pick something. You need to like choose one thing and just do it, because I was getting stressed out and I didn't have time to practice as much. And I couldn't ever do like full on rehearsals or anything. So it was kind of tricky. And I was like, okay, well, what is that going to be? And I thought about it, and I had this conversation with him, and I was like, I think I want to paint again. And he was again? You paint?
I didn't even know you painted. Oh my goodness.
I know. So we had met when I was a sophomore, and my next like foray into art was in my freshman year. And so when I met him, that was over. Like I had not done that.
Wow.
Like he knew I was kind of artsy fartsy and did that. I had no clue. But I had like taken art and like had all this stuff and like had this acrylics painting set and all this stuff. And he was like, okay, so what does that look like? And I was like, I don't know. But I've always wanted to oil paint, and I've never been able to. I mean, like, what parent is going to let their 8-year-old kid be an oil painter? Like,
oh, I understand. Yeah, yeah. It's a little bit of a responsibility with all the.
And my parents, with it. Seriously, my parents were like, we know this is what you want to do. We know you want to be Bob Ross, but we talked to grandma, and here's what she thinks. And so we're doing acrylics, which was fine. It's really not the same, and I still like get so frustrated with acrylics because.
Oh, I know. I have to admit that I learned acrylics when I went to my vocational school in high school. I took commercial art there, and the majority of it was acrylics. And I'm like, I didn't care for acrylics.
The worst.
Acrylic painters out there, we love you all.
Not my.
No,
not
it's
my
never
speed.
been my forte either.
Yes,
I know.
Yes. I love the mixability and the blendability, and like that it stays wet so long, but I can play with it for a while. And I just really love that. And I just could not get that with acrylic. And as an adult, like when I was in my 20s and had considered it off and on, but never really talked about it, I'd always been like, but I don't know how to like do it. I don't have like clean the brushes, like stupid stuff like cleaning brushes. Like really, that was holding me back. You know, like I just was like, but I don't need to
make
know
sure
where to go for that.
Yes.
This is before like YouTube was a big thing, and like, you know, now I could like get on YouTube and learn how to clean a brush in no time, but
yeah,
I had no idea. And so this same teacher who had taught my grandma owns an art studio in Sugar House, which is part of Salt Lake. And I was like, you know, maybe he still teaches, I don't know. And he does still teach, but he only teaches watercolor. But at his studio, they have all sorts of mediums. They have pottery and like whatever. And so they have an oil class, and I was like, I am doing this. Pardon me. So they I bought like a month's worth of lessons, and I went, and like it was this really funny situation, and like the teacher ended up having to like take a leave of absence, and like so the first week there wasn't even a teacher. And so at the end I was like, okay, how do I clean? Like this is like what I am here for. How do I do this? So I learned how to clean brushes and kind of just did my own thing. Like you know, like I got some basic information, like go from dark to light, or like, you know, this is how, you know, this is the difference between different qualities of paint, and here's how you can look at light and dark, like things like that. So very helpful things.
Yes.
But not a lot of like intense painting instruction. And so after a couple of, like maybe a couple months, I was like, you know, I just want to do this at home. Like it's hard to carry all of my stuff over to the place, and it eats up this much time on a Saturday morning, super early, when I kind of want to be with my family on a Saturday, and I'd like to be able to do this while my kids are at school or while my baby's napping or whatever.
Yeah, there you go. Right.
Yeah. So it like worked more with my life. So that's like I had no like formal art training after like 14 years old, which was a basic like middle school art class and stuff. Yeah, that was
so you brought it home.
It's more or less self-taught. Like I read as many books and watch as many videos as I can, and like just learn and kind of absorb. But a lot of what I've learned comes from actually doing it.
Yes, absolutely. Yep, it's all in the process. Absolutely. Yep. And I totally understand what you mean, because I discovered watercolor back in 2011.
Okay.
And I had always been fascinated with the medium, and I never actually tried it. And then when I tapped into it, I got myself a prang set way back then.
Yeah.
And I just started dabbling and having a ton of fun with it. So I understand exactly what you mean about just, you know, playing with something and learning how it works, and every book in the library and buying books in the bookstore and just absorbing yourself in what it is you want to learn and figure it all out as you go along. Exactly. So I totally relate to what you're talking about. And it's amazing what you can do and how far you can go when you just get into it, you know, get into that zone and just totally immerse yourself. That's really awesome.
Sometimes I think, oh, maybe I should like go back to school and get an art degree or whatever. But every time I talk to somebody, they're like, you don't need that. Like, it's good. And I learned certain things, and critiques were really helpful, but it's not necessary. And I've yet to have somebody buy my art who was like, no, let me see your certificate, you know, like, nobody cares. If you make good art, that's what matters. That's what
matters. Absolutely. And you make lovely, lovely, wonderful art. I love seeing your paintings when you share them. They are so lovely. I love how, trying to think of how to describe it. It's just this heart that you put into it.
Oh, thank you.
It really is. I mean, I think a lot of it has to do also with what you share about your paintings and what they mean to you and how they're connected with your family and, you know, and your history sometimes, you know. Can you share a little bit about what that means to you and why you share in that kind of a way?
Well, when I first started, you know, like in fact, I have my first painting right here. I just keep it in my studio, but it was just a still life from,
there you go. Yay.
Art, you know, whatever was set up in the studio.
Yes.
And it's, I mean, not amazing, but
it's
so proud. And that's like the first thing I like had ever oil painted, and I was like, amazing. But it didn't like mean anything to me.
Yeah. Right.
It means something to me in that it's my first oil painting.
Yes.
But it's like, it doesn't matter. But from then on, I brought in my own reference material. So I'd bring in photos or whatever. And a lot of what I painted those first couple of months was like food.
Yeah.
And so I would bring in like photos of like what I was stuffing our Thanksgiving turkey with, or like the lemon tart that I had just made with lemons and blueberries. And something like that. Like it was stuff that was part of my everyday life. And that like was stuff I did for my family, stuff that mattered to me. And I really enjoyed that. And eventually I got into some landscapes a little bit, and it was really fun, but unless it was something that like had some kind of personal connection, like a place that had mattered to me,
right,
I kind of got a little bored with it.
And somehow I knew you were going to say that. If there's not that connection with the heart and with the home, then it just doesn't have the right vibe for you. Yeah.
Yes. And so I just kept making all sorts of things. And in about 2015, I started a 100-day project, like to do paintings between Labor Day and the end of the year. And so some days I would paint like, 3 small things at once, and other days I would paint nothing. But I started, like, there was no theme, there was nothing tying it all together, just that it was part of the 100 days.
Yes.
And so some of it was like, a leaf from a tree, or like whatever. It was just whatever to get something done. And I started to dabble a little bit in some abstract. And it was a really hard time at the time, and having a hard time emotionally. My mom was getting ready to pass, and she was dying of cancer. And I had been listening to some music, and like wanted to, like, there was a song that like was speaking to me at that moment, and I wanted to like kind of memorialize some of those lines from that song. And so I just did a whole bunch of songs, or a bunch of pieces that were abstract based on those songs.
Oh, wow. That is awesome.
And those lines. And so like, they aren't subjects. They aren't like, an object or still life or anything. And it was just so freeing. And I remember the first one that I did that made me feel like that was emotion. That was a true connection that I hadn't had before. And it's still one of my favorite pieces, and it hangs in my home. But it was really interesting. I didn't even share a whole lot about it. I like posted it on Instagram and shared just a little bit about it, and like just that it had this personal meaning, and basically going through, and here was the title. And I didn't get very specific, but the response that I had was just so amazing. Like that, because of my heart being on this canvas and then sharing it in a few words, even vague words, that people could connect so easily with that. And I wanted more. I loved that feeling, that connection.
Yes.
And, over the last few years, I've realized that is what brings me joy. Like, I love that connection. And I realized that even in like performing and singing, it was the connection that I created when I would sing for other people, when I would perform, seeing the way it brightened their lives, or like that it touched their hearts. Like even just singing in church now, like people will come up to me afterward, and if they're like, oh, that was lovely, that was so nice, it's so nice. But it's the people who are like, that touched me, that made me feel.
Yes, exactly.
It just fills me up. And so the more I did that, the more I was like, this is it.
You're on it's like a perfect alignment with you and that person.
I want to do. It tells what I want to tell. It matters to me, and it can still connect to other people. It's that connection that matters so much. And I love, like, even if it's not something that they feel specifically connected to, I love that it like sparks some kind of memory or some kind of emotion in them.
Yes.
And they have that connection as well. So it doesn't have to be like, in my chair series, I have like chairs that are in my house and have my family story, and I share that story, and somebody's like, oh, we have a chair very similar, and it reminds me of this story. And I love that connection, that it helps them remember things that they had maybe forgotten, or things that had mattered once and had was just in the back of their memory, but they didn't think about it often. It had brought it to the front of their memory.
Yes, exactly.
Action again.
That actually happened to me recently with one of your chair when you were giving that tour recently in your stories that of all the paintings that were on the wall that you had done.
Yes.
And for some reason there was a rocking chair actually, that I used all the time in our living room when I was a kid. And it now sits in upstairs bedroom. And for some reason that came to mind when I saw your chair again.
Oh,
I know. And I loved that chair because I sat in it every single day, you know, whether I was watching TV with my parents or just hanging out in there, you know, on the weekends or whatever. Yes, it actually brought that to mind. So I know exactly. Love the resonation. And I totally understand why that would make what you're doing so valuable.
Yes.
I mean, like seriously, with that heart connection, which is why I called this episode Heart and Home, because and when, you know, I went to your website just to kind of look around a little bit. And when I read the description that you had on there of what your purpose was as an artist, I was like, that's exactly right. I'm like, oh, it just, I was just like, I feel it myself on a regular basis, which is why I'm always so inspired by what you share. So when I saw that, I'm like, wow, it really does come through. So I just wanted to tell you.
Glad.
Absolutely. So is there anything else you want to share about your musical history, as far anything else that you want to talk about with that?
Sure. My dad is a musician. My mom was too. My mom played the piano. She, you know, would read music really well, and she accompanied me a lot when I would sing. My dad had like 3 piano teachers give up on him because he played by ear. So like, my mom's at one extreme end and like she needs music, and my dad's at the other extreme end and like music just gets in the way. And if he has the words and like has some chord progressions, he can just do the song. He can just make it up, and it's so good. So it was kind of nice to have both.
Yeah.
And so they got me into music pretty early. I was playing piano when I was a kid and took piano all through until I was probably 14. I really loved singing, and my dad had been in some choirs and was always in charge of our choir at church. So I started going to choir at church at a pretty young age and just sang, like I have just always sung. I was always singing. And one day my mom came into my room because I was singing with Karen Carpenter. And
love her. Oh my goodness, I could totally see why you would be doing that.
I was singing a harmony part, and my mom came in and was like, "Was that you? Are you singing the harmony?" And I was like, "Yeah." And I was probably like 7. And
oh my goodness, you were only 7. Yeah. Oh wow.
So she was like, "Oh, like this is new." And I had learned to sing parts, and I would sit by my dad at church, and we would sing in the hymnal, and we would sing like a different part each verse in whatever song we were singing. And so I learned how to sing harmony really early. And
that's my favorite part, is the harmony.
And
I love
think
that part.
Music has such memory. And so singing, you know, I started singing choirs, like not just church choir, but like community choirs and school choirs when I was, you know, probably early teens, 13, and got to sing all sorts of fun parts and do all sorts of fun new musical literature, which I had been unfamiliar with because my dad was very like 70s. He loved 70s music and 80s and, you know, stuff like that. And so, and like rock, and my choral stuff and my voice lessons had all been classical and musical theater. And so I learned like this eclectic taste. And I remember singing a lot with my dad. A lot of what my dad would like to do was sing songs that had personal meaning and really think about the words and convey the feeling of the song, not just with words and not just with music, but with heart and the whole thing. And so that is something that just has stuck with me my entire life. And so when I paint, I always have music going. Sometimes I listen to audiobooks and podcasts and stuff, but I really paint better when I have music. And, when I really listen to some lyrics that really speak to me, sometimes I'll play that song again and again while I'm working on a specific piece, and it has that same association for me. And music takes me back so quickly. Like I have a friend who listens to a lot of 70s soft rock, and I'm like, oh, that's my dad. Like every time I hear it, it's like, exactly. And so when I hear songs or see certain pieces in my studio, like pieces of art, I'm like, oh, that was that song. That was
that is so cool to have that.
So it kind of just all fuses together.
Oh my gosh, I love how that works. Where you, especially when it's all tied together with your dad and the music and the art, and it's just like this amalgamation of just wonderfulness. You know? Oh my gosh, I love that.
Thanks.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So speaking of the food that you were talking about earlier that you were using as subject matter, let's dive in a little bit to your creative cooking, because I know I love watching your step by step as she makes all these wonderful meals for her family. Tell me a little bit about why you enjoy that so much.
Oh, I've probably always been a foodie. I have always liked eating. I like eating good food. Like,
yeah, there you go.
Like, I had a friend who once described me as a non-snobby foodie, which I think is a really good way to describe it, because, you know, like, I still have kids. We still eat at McDonald's sometimes, and that's okay. We still have ramen noodles. I still make my kids mac and cheese, you know, like, things like that. But I really appreciate good food. And my mom was a really good cook. I watched her. She learned from this wonderful, wonderful neighbor who was a German immigrant and taught her how to bake. So my mom was a really good baker and a really good cook. And then my dad was also a really good cook. He doesn't bake, but he cooks. And his mom was also a really good cook, and his dad too. But his mom is the one who like really influenced their cooking. And she, my dad always said she was a lot like Julia Child. Like, she reminded him of Julia Child, and she could just taste a dish and knew what it needed to make it better. And
that's a gift. I really think that's a gift.
I actually have one of her cookbooks after she and my grandpa passed. We cleaned out their house, and I got to take one of her cookbooks, which just I love. I love the notes and what she added.
Yes.
With my mom, my dad is still alive, and so her cookbooks are all still at his house. But I went through them the other day, and like seeing her handwriting and all of the corners and stuff, and seeing like the adjustments she made. Like, you know, there was one that had like, tried this time, really good. Or like there was one that was like, oh, try this next time, it'll be good. And then it's crossed out. Don't do that again. These funny little notes and like her adjustments to make it hers. And comparing recipes with my brother and sister and my dad, we all have slightly different recipes depending on when we got the recipe from her. Because of what she
that's really funny. Oh my gosh. Yeah. That is really funny. Yeah. It just goes to show how much her preferences played a role in what she used. And then she passed that on to you. Absolutely. That's a great way to honor your preferences.
I know. So I would come home from school and sit at the counter. Like, we had kind of a peninsula counter. So I would sit on one side and like read or do my homework and chat with her, and she would make whatever we were having for dinner or cookies or whatever she was doing. And so I got to see how she made things and learned a lot just by watching. And I like didn't want to cook. That was not my thing. And even into high school, we like finally got the Food Network. And that was a revelation for my family, and we loved it. And I loved watching other people cook, but I still didn't cook. And I got married, and we had been married probably 4 or 5 years, and I still didn't cook. And I was a stay-at-home mom by that point. And I had to like watch the Food Network to get motivation to make something for dinner. And it was never like anything really good. It wasn't like from scratch. It was, you know, really silly stuff, you know, like, I don't know, pizza on like a pre-made crust or something.
Yeah.
You know, like, but I added real mozzarella, and like we're using real stuff because I know this makes it good. And so I learned slowly how to do more things. And from my mom, who just like was like, well, we'll give it a try and see how it goes, I was always willing to just give it a try and see how it goes. And sometimes things worked amazingly, and sometimes they crashed and burned. And sometimes literally burned. I just learned. I learned what worked and what didn't, and I learned what our family liked. And by the time, probably around the time my second was born and was maybe a toddler, I started to cook really pretty regularly, to cook dinner. I found the more I did it, the more I actually enjoyed it, and I was surprised to see how much I enjoyed it. And so by the time my third came around, I was like, yeah, let's do Thanksgiving dinner and let's try this and let's add this. And, you know, like I'm excited to make this specific dish because, you know, everybody has their traditional stuff and whatever. But I started realizing that I was like calling my mom to be like, we just had the best dinner at this place. And, or like, I just made this amazing tart. Here's the recipe, you have to try it. And we would exchange recipes. And I realized that very slowly over the years, I was becoming like a foodie and I didn't even know it. And through sharing this with my husband, he is slowly becoming a foodie as well.
Oh, that's really, that's amazing.
Really like good food. So it's such an integral part of my family life. Like we have family dinner almost every single night. And that, like, it's such a part of home and family to me that it seems obvious that if I'm painting things that matter to me, that food is one of those things.
Yes, exactly. So that's a really awesome connection. I love how everything just comes together for you. It's all integrated, you know, and that just makes it so lovely. I love that.
Thank you.
So let's switch a little bit to another super favorite topic of mine, which is journal writing. Love journaling so much. Yes. And I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about your bullet journaling practice.
Yeah.
And how you got started with that and what you use it for.
It's actually really funny. I actually don't use a bullet journal anymore, but I do use a planner with like journaling space.
Oh, okay, cool. Yes.
No, but I do love bullet journaling. And I saw it once, like, I don't know, years ago and was like, oh, that's a really cool idea. And I tried it out and I was like, okay, this is way too rigid. I hate this. And I stopped. And then my brother mentioned something about it and I was like, oh yeah. And he said how much he loved it and that he could do this and that. And I was like, you can?
Yeah.
I looked into it more and was like, oh, like this is totally customizable. I had no idea. And I started digging around online and found like there are 1,000 different layouts you can try. And like, if you don't use this, don't use it. But if you do like this, use this. And so I tried a few different renditions and eventually found a version I really liked. So I stuck with it for probably 3 years, 2.5 to 3 years. And I love that it's everything all in one place and it's organized because I used to have it all in one place, but it was over like 6 pages, whatever I had and ideas that I had and sketches and whatever. And now it's all in one place. Like I have my agenda. So, and the one I have right now, this is not it. This is an art one, but it's similar. Like it has the days and then I have space for like to-dos that don't fit in a specific date, but need to be done that week.
Yeah, right.
Space to say like, oh, here's what's going on in my life, or here are things I'm thinking about, or something funny happened today. And I have a space that I can still record that because after I stopped blogging years ago, like that wasn't happening anymore. And so I had several years where it's kind of just whatever.
Yeah, right.
Write about it. Sometimes it would show up on Instagram, but it wasn't anything like consistent. And the bullet journaling and now like just my planner journaling has filled that gap.
So in other words, you use it to keep yourself organized and to also capture the things that are coming up in your mind and in your heart and things that you might want to dabble in at a later time, whether it's artistically or whatever part of your life that it's reflecting.
Yes.
It's really important, I think, to record things like that because it's a good track record to show where you've been and where you want to go, and you can look back on it and read it and say, oh, I remember when that started up, you know, challenges that you give yourself or appointments that you kept that were important to you and that sort of thing.
Yes.
So yeah, that's really cool. I don't really know a whole lot about the bullet journaling approach. I've seen it a lot, but I haven't really delved into it because I use a big long blank journal for my personal journaling. And then of course I do my nightly doodle, with my markers and pens, which I have a great time with. But yeah, so I've never really tapped into the bullet journaling side of things. It did appear to be rigid to me when I first saw it. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I was interested in learning, what you were doing with it.
Yeah, so, it really can be so flexible to whatever you want. And because you only do like a week or two in advance, if something's not working for you, you're not committed to an entire year of like,
yeah, right.
It's like, right. And make it adapt to what you need. So I'm surprised at how how flexible the whole concept really was. And, you know, if there are things I want to track, if I want to track how much water I'm drinking, or you know, whether or not I'm eating fast food, or like something,
Yeah.
I can add that in if that matters to me.
Yes. I'm currently using, what's it called again? The At a Glance. I'm using the weekly At a Glance planner, and it actually gives me space to track things. And I've been tracking my walking and my quiet, because quiet is a really big deal for me this year. Yes, with making space for quiet. So anyway, I would like to tap into your role as a mom when it comes to creativity, and how your mothering impacts your creative life in general.
Oh man. It's part of everyday life.
Yes, exactly.
They're funny. I have, just for reference, I have a 12-year-old, a 9-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 3-year-old. And they are so creative in ways that I had not ever imagined. And it's so fun to see them work things out and try new things, and just be unafraid. It's really, and like, motherhood is tricky. It's not for the faint of heart.
I know.
But it is also so rewarding. And I love when my 6-year-old, who's very into making books lately, like just with folded paper, and he like staples it all together, and he loves making little books, and the stories he comes up with are just so funny. And the drawings he does, like the perspective he takes when he makes these little drawings, are like, who even thought of that? Like, it's so funny. Like his point of view, it's really cool to see his point of view. And I love seeing the value in that. And it helps remind me that there is value in my point of view. Like, sometimes it's easy to think like, you know, like, I'm just an ordinary person. There's nothing, like, we're all special, but like, why would anybody listen to what I have to say? But so seeing him reminds me, like, there is still value in what I have to say. There's still value in each of us. We have our own perspectives, and those matter. And that is more where my influence is drawn from. Like, I don't, you know, sometimes it's like seeing my kids' toys, or seeing like things like that remind me of things that I want to paint them. But for the most part, it's more reminding me that we all have a voice, and we have
That's powerful. That's really powerful. Honoring your perspective and recognizing the value of what you have to say, whether it's in a painting or with a meal or whatever you're speaking, you know, whether it's text or video or whatever it is. I think it's awesome that you recognize the value, and that you're actually able to see that and connect with that with your child. That is so cool. I love that. I know I sometimes get into that with my grandson when he comes up with drawings and things of that nature. And I love to see what he has in mind, and when he tells me a story about what the picture is about, you know, and that kind of thing. So I can relate to that. My kids, of course, are grown, so grandkid is a good reference point on that. Oh, but anyway, you know, I think to wrap up this interview, this wonderful creative conversation that we're having, is there something that you can share with our audience that can help them find a path to discovering their creative voice and what that can look like authentically?
I think, don't be afraid to try whatever, you know, sounds interesting to you. And like, I can't even tell you how many things I tried over the years just to see. And because of that, I became good at a lot of things, but it took a while to finally figure out what I was really meant to be doing, like what really spoke to me. But in the meantime, I learned all these other things. Like, I know how to do harding or needlework, and I know how to, you know, cook. I know how to quilt. I know how to, you know, alter clothing, and all these random things. But it took a long time to figure out what it was I actually was meant to do. Like,
so be patient. So experiment, be patient with yourself. Don't be afraid to try new things. And eventually you will find the thing that just aligns and makes you feel the most alive.
Yes.
I love that. I love that. So yeah, experimentation is key to finding your voice. Absolutely. I can relate to that very much so, especially with the watercolor paintings. That's really when I started feeling like I was tapping into something on the inside of me rather than just replicating what was on the outside of me. So I can totally understand and relate to what you're saying. And I think that's a perfect word to summarize our creative conversation with for Refresh Daily Podcast. Thank you so much, Annie, for joining us today and for sharing your story. And I trust that our viewers and listeners will take some good stuff away from what we shared and that they will get inspired to go do some creating, in whatever pathway they decide to choose for themselves. So thank you so much for joining us, and may joy align with your creative heart.
Thank you so much for listening to Refresh Daily Podcast. You are welcome to subscribe to my YouTube channel at Dawn Herring for future episodes. You can also listen if you visit my website at www.dawnherring.net. And while you're there, you can subscribe to The Art of Joy, my newsletter. And when you subscribe, you will receive 2 complimentary downloads, The Art of Journaling Toolbox and The Art of Journaling Prompt Playbook. Have yourself a fabulous day, and may joy align with your creative heart.